And the sentiment here in this country was that we should divest, we should get out of South Africa, because by staying there in business, you're supporting the existing system. And I was on the board of directors of the Kellogg Company, and just to give one example of things that come your way as you assume leadership roles. The Kellogg Company in 1947 had established a small branch operation in South Africa. And they had about 450 employees. Reverend Sullivan was a great leader in civil rights in this country, and he had established standards suggested to businesses for doing business in South Africa, of integration, of benefits, opportunities, and so forth. And so the Kellogg Company had exceeded all of the Sullivan principles. They'd integrated the workforce, all of the facilities. They had South African blacks in positions in administration and finance and research and marketing, in production, and had worked closely with the townships in improving housing and schools and health services. And they were the first company in South Africa to recognize a black union. Bill Lamoth was the CEO of the company. And the pressure was on from shareholders for Kellogg to get out of South Africa. And Bill said to the board of directors, he said, you know, we can do that. It's, in terms of bottom line of the business, it's not that important. He said, but we've been there and we've worked with those people. I've given those people 25-year service pins. And if we sell, we'll sell to South Africa, Germany, or Japan. And none of them will carry on what we've been doing with our folks. So he asked 3 outside directors to go to South Africa, to review the situation, and to come back with a recommendation for the board of directors, which they would follow. And so he asked Peter Estes, who was a retired vice president of General Motors, who had been active in South Africa, Paul Smucker of the J.M. Smucker Company, just a marvelous human being. Pete Estes, Paul Estes, Pete Estes, Paul Smucker, Russ Mawby, to be a three outside directors to go to the company. We went to Washington and met with the ambassador and others from South Africa, met with our State Department, did bushels of reading, met with a gentleman called Chief Botoleza, who was a South African tribal leader. We went to South Africa. We met with people in government. We met with people in the labor unions. We visited with people in business, industry, all aspects of operation there. The first unsettling thing was that we came into Johannesburg. I had a certain image of South Africa, obviously, from all of the reading and the media. Stayed in a beautiful hotel, 6 stars, I think. And we went up that evening to the dining room, and at that table, we were at this table, that table, 4 black men. At this table, 2 black couples. Completely unexpected from my image of what apartheid really did. So the realities were quite different in some respects than I had anticipated. Now that didn't mean apartheid was there, very evident. But when I went to Soweto, there were all of the cardboard and tin shanties, but there was also a country club, and there were homes of Bishop Tutu and others, more elegant than I could imagine living in, all in the township. So there was a disconnect. So we talked with all sorts of people, and in particular, black leaders of civil rights organizations and of the union asked us to stay. And businessmen asked us to stay because we could provide pressure and opportunity for them to do what they wanted to do for their workers also. So we came back and recommended that the Kellogg Company should stay. I, wearing my foundation hat, had talked with our board of trustees previously about this possibility. The Kellogg Foundation started initially very small in South Central Michigan, became national, became international throughout Latin America in 1942 at the start of World War II. And then following the war, became international again, Latin America and Northern Europe for about 30 years. And in 1980, we began phasing out of Europe, expanding in Latin America, and looking at the continent of Africa. In talking with people in South Africa then, first thing you realized was that most of the major universities were integrated, and that there were more black Africans qualified to go to university than had opportunities to go with scholarships. We could bring, many foundations had been bringing South Africans here, but we could support 7 students in South Africa for the cost of bringing 1 here. And so we began to work immediately with South African universities. And instead of having another study trip, which many foundations had done, our board authorized one of our officers to go. We picked the fields of health professions, education, food systems, and rural development, public administration, and business administration for our concentration. Because it was so vivid that it's not a question of if apartheid will end. Apartheid was wrong, it was going to end. The question was, when does it end and how does it end? And how can we prepare enough black women and men for the opportunities which obviously will be present for them and which the country will desperately need. So that was the spring and February of 1985 that I visited there. We went back to South Africa in the summer, and we had our first bursary scholarship students. And we committed to students at those universities on a basis of completing their degree. We would stay with them on full cost as long as they made progress for their objective. So that apartheid then ended much more quickly than had been projected. It really ended in 1990, and we began to help produce the cadre of leaders. Well, it was a controversial decision, difficult decision, but the kind of opportunity that you'll find in your leadership responsibilities. So let me just stop here and see what you would like to talk about if we motivated a question anywhere. Yes?
I read an interview that you did with, I think it might have been the Battle Creek newspaper, and in it you mentioned something, I can't remember the exact quote, but you attributed it to your father about optimism. About optimism?
Yeah.
And how important it is to keep an optimistic outlook. It can be, I found it can be really easy to be negative. I don't know if it's, it's just, it takes a little bit of effort to be optimistic.
Well,
and I was just kind of wondering if you could touch on how important it is.
I find optimism, being optimistic, a lot more fun than being pessimistic. And has far greater prospects of really making things better for the future. And I find that a lot of it is simply mindset. And you get up in the morning and you can let yourself go downhill, or you can make yourself go uphill. So I think a basic mindset of recognizing that most people are good. Now, there are a few bums in the world, but most people are good. And I always had the privilege in being a grant maker that most everyone who came to you had a sincere commitment to what they were trying to accomplish, whatever it was, in work with the elderly and environmental issues, whatever the issue, they were sincere in their effort, and they needed assistance in moving forward with their plans. So I think as I look at our situation today, we've got a lot of very bright people. We've done some very dumb things. I think our greatest challenge, perhaps, as I think about society in general, is that we need to rethink our commitment to education.